There's an old expression that working with a bureaucracy is like death by 1,000 paper cuts. We live in the most regulated society that has ever existed, with the least amount of consequence for the ones who most need to be regulated. Our world is filled with agency and agents who effectively look the other way for the most connected, and find the most punitive consequences for the smallest offenders. The bottom line in American regulation is that if you have money, you have nothing to fear, and if you are someone who isn't connected, you can count on a lifetime of punishment and overburdens for your efforts to better yourself. Building a regulatory framework has long been pursued by the American people. The assumption is that no one really wants unscrupulous people running the show. Americans don't want dirty water or dirty air or scams perpetrated upon the vulnerable. Savvy politicians have made a system where the promises of regulation and their subsequent agencies are desired by the majority of people and are a surefire pathway for their perpetual power. The reality of this cushy socialism for the well-connected is that those politicians understand some dark truths about this nefarious system. The people positioned in the political theater have the ability to say out loud how much they are doing to create a better world. They can get their bills passed, their agencies built and funded, and have their press conferences stating all the wonderful things they are doing to protect the little guy. In the background, they get to also exempt the most egregious offenders because of their donations. They also know that most Americans are employed by an employer. Big business dominates the new landscape of employment. Most people work for either a major corporation, a subcontractor of that corporation, or a subsidiary business that supports the infrastructure of the major industry. If they don't work for that end of the private sector spectrum, they work for the government. Statistically speaking, the breakdown of employment goes something like this. 15% of the workforce work for the federal government. Add another 19 million workers, or 14% that work for local or state governments, including school districts. Add 21 million people, or 16% of the population, who work for the top 100 employers in the United States, and you realize how many people labor for entities that are not oriented to the average American. These numbers don't include the secondary or subcontracted services that support this massive oligarchical system. Simply on their face, without those ancillary employees, the totals add up to 45% of the population that will never be subjected to the regulatory stresses the average entrepreneur faces. You have to pay attention to what the politicians say, because generally, when they speak about something, the opposite is actually the reality on the ground. Politicians love to wax poetic about how small business is the backbone of the American economy, and that we need to do all we can to help them succeed. Their rhetoric is friendly, while their actions are crushing. It is only small business that bears the brunt of these draconian agencies. The government knows that the small business person cannot afford to defend themselves against the federal government. They aren't well connected, and are more likely to be worried about next week's payroll than going up against the agency. The government gets a win either way. They bury their donors' competition, at the same time get to say that they are making huge inroads into the issue the bureaucracy was designed to alleviate. It becomes a win for everyone involved but the average middle-class person in America. Big business gets bigger, and government gets more funding to perpetuate this evil darkness on the entrepreneur. The reality of our system is that no matter who you elect at the top, they sit on a cesspool of corruption below. In my life, politicians from both parties have all talked incessantly about the need for smaller government, more effective regulations, and more streamlined, business-friendly regulations. So the people elect them, and then slowly each of the firebrand advocates is sucked deep into the cancerous depths that lie lurking below them in the regulatory vortex. Few are immune. Those who stand above it are generally dismissed as radicals and obstructionists standing in the way of the good people in the agencies from doing their job. So the machine grows bigger and more powerful. Public service is now the best occupation in the country. Their pay is substantially higher, their benefits commensurately better, and they have nearly no chance of ever being fired for their performance. The agencies are captured, bought and paid for by those that can afford it. They are paid off by backroom and sweetheart deals. Both politician and agency heads become wealthier because of these reciprocal relationships. And the middle-class dreamer who wanted to use his idea to better his life and family are smashed down by the overburden. Most of these entrepreneurs are earnest workers who aren't even aware they are breaking the rules or violating the tax code. The rules are so behemoth that it takes CPAs and legal counsel just to understand what the regulations are for the endeavors. Most don't even know that they have broken the rules until the letters come and the regulators knock on the door. The terror of these agencies cannot be understated. This frontier of small business is the land of guilt until innocence. The burden of proof is always upon the accused, and while the platitudes are there to the contrary, the reality on the ground is that only the competition of big business gets these knocks on the door. Small business spend their meager profits defending charges that are usually nebulous and amorphous to prove, and the process becomes the punishment. Regulators can tie people up in acres of red tape and drown them in eclipsing time, all while watching their connected friends waltz past the rules because they have the means to make the regulator's life better. This sick system of bribery that isn't shown, but winked at by everyone in the know, is the undoing of the beautiful energy that has always been in the DNA of the American spirit. There are so few who understand this dark force. President Trump said it out loud and was elected for it. People know it, they feel it and fear it. When people come along and say they can fix it, the temptation for the average person is palpable. The people want this result, but so few politicians actually understand the inner workings. And more cynically, those that do understand it don't ever want to see it undone. There is a love affair with the wealth and power that the current regulation-driven system creates. The country needs someone who wants to dismantle this cushy system, but also has the experience to do it. They have to understand what they are up against, and that the forces will come like a hurricane at them when they start to shift the conversations. Listen to the people running and see if they understand this interwoven web of deceit and destruction, and if they know fully how to battle it. Many will say they want to change it, but someone actually needs to know how. There are people who have the experience, but it will take a diligence and fortitude not seen in the current stock of career politicians to stand up against these forces. Find the people who have done it, not just who's said they can. We've been subject to election after election with all the right words said, and none of the results we would ever hope for. America is run by the regulator, and nothing will shift until we understand that sinister system is on purpose.